Hello everyone, this is Jason Benedict, Director of Online Marketing and Public Relations with Program HR 3648 with the July edition of the Insider Market Update. Now I know some of you are new with Program HR 3648 and some of you are wondering how can I absorb and learn as much about the short sale market niche and how can I transform my business while helping homeowners avoid foreclosure. Well, the Insider Market Update is your monthly source where you will find all of the latest trends, tools, training, and technology for you to be the solution for distressed homeowners who may be losing hope and facing foreclosure. So it's imperative that each day, week, and every month that you take advantage of and truly apply all of the resources, trainings, support, and marketing materials that Program HR 3648 has to offer. How important it is that you listen to each Insider Market Update that our founders, Jeremy Bowman and Woods Davis, work tirelessly to research and compile all the important facts and statistics, review the latest reports, analyze market data, and provide you with turnkey cutting-edge industry solutions. Now, before I get started with this edition of the Insider Market Update, I wanted to announce something really exciting. Our founders, Jeremy Bowman and Woods Davis, along with a select group of America's leading real estate professionals and members of the National Association of Expert Advisors, rallied together with noted real estate experts and coaches Jay Kinder and Mike Reese to co-write The New Rise in Real Estate. The nation's trusted real estate advisors revealed their top secrets for buying and selling homes in the new real estate economy. Now, the reason why I'm so excited about this is the fact that Jeremy and Woods just became #1 best-selling authors on Amazon. That's right, after only just a few days from its initial release, The New Rise in Real Estate just became a #1 bestseller on Amazon in 3 different categories. Okay, so let's jump right in and talk about what's taking place in our market. This might be the most decisive edition, the most important edition of the Insider Market Update that we've ever done. Why? Well, because we've talked about it over the last 2 editions. What more and more people are starting to realize is that the market is getting better and better and better. However, there will always be some naysayers out there in the news that the market was bad. But the market was good, and we had about 60 days of really good commentary by the media on the market recovering. Now, the naysayers are coming out saying, whoa, wait a minute, let's really take a look at this data and see what's taking place. And that's where our importance comes in, because when there's conflicting thoughts on where the real estate market is, they need an expert. Both buyers and sellers need experts. And that's who we are. That's what Program HR 3648 representatives are across every one of the markets that they're serving. So let's not get concerned about the divergent opinions that are being cast out right now by all sorts of media. Let's try to make some sense of it this month. First off, we want to let you know that, as we mentioned last month, pending home sales are fine. Last month, as you remember, people were really panicking because pending sales had dropped a little bit from the month before. But what we explained is, if we went all the way back over almost the last 2 years, the month before was an all-time high. It slipped a little bit last month, but now they're back again at a 2-year high. So that's important that we realize that pending sales are starting to drive forward almost like a wave. There is no doubt in my mind, and again, there's 2 different pieces of the recovery. The first piece of the recovery is when sales come back. The second piece of recovery, which lags behind, is prices coming back. And we're in the first half of that recovery right now. More and more people are starting to realize that this is one of the greatest times in American real estate history to buy a home. And not only are they realizing that, but they're reacting on it. So here's existing home sales. Now, if we go to the existing home sales report, which was a little bit down for the month from before, but we give you the numbers every single month. So we still have over 12,000 houses selling each and every day in this country. Over 12,000. Remember who we're using this information with. If we're talking to a buyer that's saying, well, I'm not really sure if now is the right time for me to buy, let them know that regardless of what they may have heard in the media, that actually the market is pretty strong. Over 12,000 houses sold yesterday. Another 12,000 houses will sell today. And another 12,000 will sell tomorrow. And for the people that are saying, well, you know, I think that I would buy a home, but I'm really not sure whether or not I can get a mortgage, because there's so much fear of that in the market right now. Let them know that almost 9,000 people are approved for a mortgage in this country every single day. Now, we have to understand that lending standards are much tighter now than they were, say, back in 2006, but still almost 9,000 people a day get a mortgage in this country. Okay, so let's take a look at sales. here's a graph from the calculatedrisk.com. And what this chart shows is new construction sales and existing home sales, going all the way back to 1994. Now, obviously, they're different. The left side is for existing sales, and the right side is for new home sales. Of course, there's less new homes that sell than less existing home, but they laid those two graphs on top of one another, and what we can see is though new sales have really tanked, and that's what they call a distressing gap. Both new home sales and existing home sales are starting to climb up. They're turning the corner. They've been getting more and more positive over the last couple of months. And we have to make sure that we understand this, and that we have to make sure that we explain that the market has two recoveries. One is in sales and the other is in pricing. Here are two different quotes from the Wall Street Journal, two different articles, two different authors. Both of them came out at the end of June. And the first quote reads, "Home sales data provided fresh support for the view that the strong start to the spring home buying season marks the beginning of a recovery, not a temporary blip due to unusually warm weather." Now, there are still some people out there saying, well, the only reason the first half of the year was so strong in regard to sales is because we had a very mild winter across the northern section of the country. But here's what we need to tell them. Sales are up in Tucson, sales are up in San Diego, and sales are up in Miami. The weather in those three cities didn't change. We've been making this argument now for the last 3 or 4 editions of the Insider Market Update. And the reason sales are up is because people are beginning to believe in purchasing homes again, not because the weather was nice. Okay, so here's the second quote, which is taking a different position. Some economists believe housing demand will pull back later this year, as broader economic worries begin to weaken Americans' appetite to buy homes. Now, remember, as we stated in the June IMU edition, it's important that we provide clarity from the confusion. Here is a perfect example of the media playing both sides, which can lead a potential buyer into a world of confusion. And as a program HR 3648 representative, we have to alleviate concerns. We're not saying there's not concern both on the bank's part and on the consumer's part, and maybe that's pulling back some of the demand. But there's enough people out there right now more worried about the betterment of their lifestyle than they are worried about how the media may depict the market, the economy, or even the world economy. Let's make sure we eliminate any concerns and give good counsel and remove the noise factor. Let's push forward, not creating demand, not selling a house to anyone that shouldn't buy a house, but instead finding the people who do want to buy a house and helping those people buy that home. Now let's go to the second half of the recovery, the pricing piece. There's a tremendous amount of confusion on this side, just like there was tremendous confusion 3 months ago on the sales side. Are sales really taking off? Is it the weather? Is it that we just got lucky in the first 3 months? What happened is that all of a sudden more and more people started buying houses. There was some confusion about that. But after 90 or 100 and 120 days later, we realized that people want to buy houses. Now, the confusion is about pricing. Remember, the pricing piece of the recovery lags behind the sales piece of the recovery. So now that the sales piece has taken off, the pricing piece is coming into question because it's bouncing around. There's no better proof of this than the two quotes we found that came out in the last couple of weeks. The first quote is from Lawrence Yun at the National Association of Real Estate Editors Conference in Denver. And Lawrence Yun is the NAR's chief economist, and he quoted, "This time next year, there could be a 10% price appreciation. I would not be surprised to see that." So Lawrence Yun is saying that prices could go up 10% in the next 12 months. At the same time, Morgan Stanley was coming out with their housing report. And in that housing report, given at about the same time that Lawrence Yun was saying the prices were going to rise 10%, they came out and said, we estimate a drop of 5 to 10% more on non-distressed housing, notwithstanding historically high affordability metrics. So one expert is saying there's going to be a 10% increase in prices over the next 12 months, and the other is saying that there's going to be 5 to 10% decrease in prices. So again, here lies the confusion. That's why people come to us. That's why people need our expert advice. If everyone could figure it out very easily, there would be no need for us. But now, when they do come to us, we have to understand what they're saying. Let's take a quick look at the Morgan Stanley report. Now, for those of you out there that like to dig a little bit deeper, the full report is available if you go to the resources page at the end of the Insider Market Update. But here's an actual table from that report. What they're predicting is that in the aggregate, non-distressed properties and distressed properties coming together, there's going to be about 5 to 8% decrease from now until the fourth quarter of 2013 to the first quarter of 2014. So we're talking about the next 12 to 18 months. The interesting thing is that they think non-distressed properties are going to fall more readily and that the distressed properties have already hit their bottom. So let's identify two important factors here. The section that we have outlined in red, they are saying non-distressed properties are going to fall 5 to 10%. And the black circle there, from the fourth quarter of 2013, which is about now 18 months away, to the first quarter of 2014. That's their opinion, and again, if you go to the report, you can find out the reasoning behind their opinion. So now we have Lawrence Yun saying prices are going to go up, and we have Morgan Stanley saying prices are going to go down. So what's going to happen with the prices? Well, obviously no one knows that for sure, but remember, what we've been talking about over the last couple of editions, the IMU. Your advice does not have to be perfect, it has to be excellent. So we make sure we know how to respond. The reasons there's some confusion is because pricing is bouncing around as the recovery of sales is taking place. That's important to know that. Here's the S&P Case-Shiller Home Pricing Index, and as you can see that it's been bouncing. There's been a turn just recently toward the more positive numbers. That, coupled with all of the good sales reports that are coming out, are leading people to say, well, maybe we've hit the bottom on pricing. But as you can see, it's been bouncing up and down for quite some time now. And the reason for that is that even the American public isn't 1,000% sure that they're going to jump in. So that little bit of uncertainty is causing a little bit of bouncing around in sales and in pricing. There are some people that are very negative about Case-Shiller. Of course, they say, well, they're only covering 20 cities. Well, it's actually a little bit more than that. There are about 20 cities that they identify in each report. But many of those reports cover that city and all of the counties around that city, the region around that city. So if you're in a particular geographic location that is nowhere near any one of these cities, we understand. But let's take a look at the concept. This is the report that has been determining the consumer confidence in pricing, the experts' confidence in pricing. And if we look at the red section there that we highlighted, from the recent lows, the last bump down, they're coming up. And look what's taken place. All 20 cities had an increase in pricing. So it looks as though there is starting to be a turn on pricing. Now there are some headwinds coming, which we'll talk about in a second, but we want you to understand that yes, pricing looks like it's bottoming out. Now in certain parts of the country, it's not going to be as steady. That bottom is not going to be as solid as in other parts of the country, which again we'll talk about in a few seconds. But we want you to understand across the entire country, prices look like they're stabilizing. So that 10% up, that 10% down, well, in a particular area, that might happen. But across the board, there's some stability and it looks like it's climbing to a positive. Now again, we like aggregate data. We don't necessarily like Morgan Stanley's opinion or Lawrence Yun's opinion. Let's put a bunch of opinions together. And the latest home price expectation survey just came out. And in that survey, 111 of the top housing industry experts, some in the academic world, some CEOs of major corporations, some economists across the country, they put all those opinions together. They put all those people's opinions together. And they asked him, where do you think prices are going to be over the next 5 years? And all of those experts together, they averaged out their opinion. It's not one person's opinion against the other person's opinion. It's 111 of the leading experts in the country and what they thought. And what you can see is that this year, they think that prices are going to be pretty stable. They're going to fall less from the beginning of this year to the end of this year, less than 0.5%. But each year going forward, there's going to be more and more appreciation. And that's big. And it's important that we understand that. As appreciation starts to climb, we're going to get back to a more normalized market. And what the experts are saying is that after this year is over, we're going to start climbing back to normal types of appreciation. The normal appreciation pre-bubble in this country was 3.6% annually. By 2016, we're going to be about those numbers. But the numbers are going to start turning green right through the next year. Not only does the Home Price Expectation Survey call for an increase starting next year, but the Urban Land Institute study and the Demand Institute study, which is cited in the Morgan Stanley study we talked about before, all three of those studies are saying, you know what? This year is a little bit up and down. But starting next year, we're going to start seeing growth. appreciation in the housing sector. So if someone asks you, you can honestly reply that none of the economists or analysts are really sure. Again, your advice doesn't have to be perfect, but let's go through a couple of the slides of what the majority of people are saying and the majority of the experts are saying. The first one is from IHS Global Insight, and it quotes, "Have we hit bottom? It is tempting but premature to conclude so. The number of foreclosures working their way through the pipeline suggests that prices could take a turn for the worse, especially if the U.S. economy weakens. The most likely scenario, in our view, is that home prices will zigzag over the coming months, rising during the selling season, slipping in the fall. We're expecting home prices to cautiously start moving up in 2013, however." Now, what they're saying, and what we've talked about this every month for the last 12 months, is that prices can't really take off because of the foreclosure inventory. There's an increase in supply coming. But remember, we talked about the window of opportunity this selling season, this spring and early summer, that window of opportunity where prices will start to tick up because there's less inventory. Plus, those foreclosures will not have come to market yet. That's what we're in the middle of right now, exactly what we predicted at the end of the last year and the beginning of this year. It's exactly what's happening right now. Capital Economics stated recent strong upward momentum in house prices may not be sustained for much longer, but we're encouraged that confidence in the housing price outlook is improving, with consumers expecting prices to rise further over the next year and driven by investors attracted by record low valuations, rock bottom interest rates, and low yields on other assets. There is an underlying improvement in housing demand underway. Okay, so part of the reason why prices have stabilized and even ticked up is there's a shortage of inventory almost across the entire country. In each place of the country, in certain price points, in certain zip codes, there's a shortage of inventory. And demand is up, so sales are up. The sales part of the equation is in great shape. The pricing part, which is not just determined by demand but also by supply, is still a little bit hazy because of the increased supply expected as we move forward. As a matter of fact, if we take a look at what NAR reported over the last several months, this is the percentage of distressed property sales, and that has gone down each month over the first 5 months of this year. So what does that mean? Well, the good news is that as some of those foreclosure properties come out, there are buyers waiting for them. So sales are going to tick up even more as the distressed inventory is released to the market, especially as the banks start to realize they should be doing more and more short sales. Sales are going to go up, and this number will go back to 35. It's not going to lower the other numbers, it's just going to be a total increase in sales across the board. But what this is also showing us is that there were less distressed properties sold as a percentage of the entire whole. What does that mean? Well, less discounted properties were selling each month, meaning more non-discounted properties were sold. What does that do to price? It makes the price appear to be ticking up. Not because the price of any individual house necessarily went up, but because the percentage of distressed properties selling went down. The discounted sales started to evaporate, so that's what we're in the middle of right now. So what happens going forward? Well, let's take a look at pricing, which is the big issue when you're sitting with a buyer and a seller right now. That's going to be the big issue this summer. Should I buy, or are prices going to go down? Should I sell, or prices going to go up? So let's take a look at the supply and demand. Let's start with the supply this time. What we can see is supply compared to the same time last year came straight down, but we're now seeing a balancing off of that supply. So even though we're having increased sales, we're not eating into the inventory, meaning there are more and more houses starting to come to market. Most of those houses are people that have been waiting for a long time to get their house sold. Just like there's a pent-up buying demand that's being unleashed on the market right now. There's a pent-up selling demand as well, and some of those houses are coming to market now. It's been relatively steady now for this entire year, with a little bit of uptick in the last 2 months. So as far as inventory is concerned, demand is up, and inventory has remained pretty solid. And that should mean that prices are going to start to go up, because what's taking place is the inventory is solid, but demand is increasing. However, we have to realize there is again that distressed inventory coming to market, and we're going to spend a few seconds on that. The good news is that shadow inventory available in this country right now is shrinking. Here's an actual graph from CoreLogic from their shadow inventory report. And if you look all the way to the right, you can see that the combined numbers of houses that are pending REO inventory pending foreclosure inventory, and pending serious delinquency inventory combined, those numbers are shrinking. And the big shrink is when we take a look at October of 2009, we can see how big of a piece the red was. That's beginning to shrink. Why is that? Well, not as many people are falling 90 days behind on their mortgage payments. So the red number is actually shrinking into the category of people who did fall 90 days behind and are becoming some of the pending foreclosures. The people that are falling 90 days behind are falling rather dramatically right now. So the good news is the overall shadow inventory is shrinking. And the challenge is that some of those 90-day delinquents are going to become foreclosure. So it's imperative that we get them to a short sale over the next couple of months. As a matter of fact, here's a quote from a Housing Wire report, and it says, mortgage servicers completed nearly 123,000 foreclosures in the first quarter, the most since the middle of 2010. According to the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the report showed a gradually restarting foreclosure process that servicers froze in October of 2010. Remember robo-signing? Remember what we talked about in the last couple of issues of the Insider Market Update? They shut off the bank's ability to go ahead and foreclose, to bring a house fully through the foreclosure, because they threatened to penalize them in the third quarter of 2010. That's why the banks got backed up. Just a couple of months ago, the National Mortgage Settlement Act, they gave them the path, and the banks are now starting to foreclose on those houses. And more foreclosures are coming, the most since the middle of 2010, and they're starting to come to market. Now here's the important thing. Here's where you can give excellent advice. The states that were hit the hardest in the foreclosure wave in 2007 and 2008 are different than the states that are going to be hit with the foreclosures now. So it's not going to be equally distributed across the country. Here is a graph from CoreLogic, a graph of judicial versus non-judicial states. And what that means is there are some states that have to go through a judicial foreclosure process, and that requires a court to foreclose on those houses. So in some states it's much easier. The blue line, the dark blue line, represents that states where it's easier, so the percentage of houses in foreclosure inventory is actually less than it was on the judicial states. Why is that? Because they already had cleared a bunch of it, but it was less difficult to do, so they were able to do more. In the states where it became more difficult to foreclose on a home, more foreclosures got tied up in the court system. They are now about to be released. As a matter of fact, here is a quote on that exact point. Though the national foreclosure inventory levels remain steady, around 1.4 million homes, there have been dramatic shifts at that level, at the state level. Nevada, Arizona, and Michigan, for example, each experienced at least 20% decline in foreclosure inventory from a year ago. While foreclosure inventories in most states are declining, the foreclosure inventory is still rising in many judicial states such as Hawaii, New York, and Connecticut. The original states that went through that whole foreclosure mess are in much better shape this time than the states that prevented those foreclosures from coming to market because of their court system. Here is a map from CoreLogic from a foreclosure report, not the shadow inventory report, but the foreclosure report indicating the highest foreclosure inventory. And immediately we can see that Florida still has a big number, but Florida is kind of a different animal altogether. However, we believe prices are changing right now in Miami, Naples, and along the coast because they are clearing some of that inventory. But as a state, they're still a judicial state, and because of that, they're still a backup. Jersey is also red. If we look at the tan states, Illinois, New York, Connecticut, Maine, those states that are judicial states that have a backup of inventory, we have to make sure that if we're practicing in any one of those states, we realize what that means. We have to realize that the states with the most inventory are going to be the states that are most impacted in a negative way by pricing, because there will be more houses coming to market. The only anomaly there is Nevada. Nevada still looks like it has a lot of inventory. Part of the reason for that is even though they are a non-judicial state, they actually came out with a law last October saying that if you foreclose improperly, it's a felony in that state, and they just froze the foreclosures for a period of time. They're working through that system right now, and we believe that Nevada will clear a lot of their inventory. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of parts of Nevada that are waiting for that inventory to come to market. There's a shortage of inventory for some of those buyers in those markets. Every state is going to be impacted by foreclosures coming to the market, but the map in front of us right now gives us a good feel for which states are going to be impacted the most. The other thing that's going to work in our favor is the fact that the banks are now beginning to realize that short sales sell, and they sell for more money, and it's a better deal for everyone involved. No vacant house, nobody being forced out of their homes, more value, so there's less equity being eaten up, and they don't have to process or deal with the process of owning a vacant home. Here's a quote from Realty Tracks foreclosure report, Brandon Moore, the CEO, and it states, "Our first quarter foreclosure sales report showed that the average price of a pre-foreclosure home was more than $27,000 higher than the average price of a bank-owned home." And by pre-foreclosure, he means a short sale. More banks are now recognizing that treating the problem of delinquent mortgages with short sales rather than bank repossessions can help them minimize their losses and also avoid taking on more REOs, which they then have to manage, maintain, and market for sale. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We've been beating this drum for at least 6 months now, stating that short sales were going to be the thing that the banks are moving towards in 2012. And that's already been proven out. There's more and more short sales. In most parts of the country, there are more short sales being done right now than foreclosure sales. So it's important that we realize that the short sales are driving the market and will continue to do so. Let's shift a little bit and talk about opportunities and talk about the demand side of it a little bit here. There is definitely an increase in demand, and that's healthy for a market recovery. As we said many times, even in just this edition, the first part of the recovery will be sales, and that will come back. The second part of the recovery, once sales come back, prices will come back as we eat through the inventory. So demand is crucially important, and the reason we believe that is there's a switch right now in that demand. It's not just because prices are low, not just because interest rates are low, and not just because it's a fabulous time to buy a house financially, but people are starting to realize, wait a second, there's more to the value of a home. Okay, so moving right along, here's another study, the National Housing Survey, a government study from Fannie Mae. And here are some of the questions and answers. What's a better place to raise your children? Your own home or a rental? What's better for your family safety? Your own home or a rental? What's better for engagement in your community? Your own home or a rental? What's a better sense of privacy and security? Your own home or a rental? And what you see here is the results. The American people believe very strongly that the best place to raise their kids, the place where their family is going to feel safe, and the place where they're going to want to be engaged in their community, and a place where you're going to get the most privacy and security is in your own home, not a rental. Now, that's not Program HR 3648 saying that. That's the American people saying that. As real estate professionals across this country, we have to make sure that we are trumpeting that from the hilltops, that people already understand it's in their best interest to get into the home ownership. And again, we're not suggesting we sell a house to someone that shouldn't buy a house. What we're suggesting is that we open their minds further to the values of home ownership. In a TD Bank survey, more than half of the consumers polled said home ownership is a vital component of defining the American dream. 59% associated feelings of excitement or pride as part of the first-time home buying process. Interesting words here, excitement and pride. Now, here's the most important piece of that study. 84% of today's younger renting generation, ages 18 to 34, intend to buy a house. Here's another piece of information from that Morgan Stanley report we highlighted earlier. This is the fall off in home ownership. We all know that home ownership rates have fallen in this country. Here's a percentage by age category. Under 35 has fallen more than 50%, more than any other category. And here we go on the next slide. Here's a direct quote from Eric Belsky, the managing director of the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University. And he says, surveys consistently find that the overwhelming majority of young adults plan to own a home in the future, but many would-be buyers have stayed on the sidelines, waiting for the job outlook to improve and house prices to stop falling. But as markets tighten, these fence sitters may begin to take advantage of today's low home prices and unusually low mortgage rates. With rents up and home prices sharply down and mortgage interest rates at low records, monthly mortgage costs relative to monthly rents haven't been this favorable since the early 1970s. So here we have the managing director of the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University saying, based on what's happening right now, maybe some of these people should buy. Now, the only thing that somebody is going to pull out of that and say, well, they're talking about lower home prices, usually low mortgage rates. Remember what we've always talked about. It's not the price of the house, it's the cost of the house. Now, the cost is brought up into several things. Pricing is a piece of that, and the other is mortgage rates, which we update from the first of the year all the way up to today. And we can see that the rates are really phenomenal rates right now. That's why some people are jumping out. But we have to talk about the cost of owning a home. So this also came from the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University, their latest study. And it took a look at the cost of owning a home in 3 different categories. Number 1 is the mortgage payment. And they did it in 2011, 1990, 2000, 2006, 2011, and an average house in this country. And if you want all the methodologies and everything, you can go back to the Resource Center and get that actual report if you'd like. But what we're seeing is that buying a house today is almost half the price of what it was buying it in 2006 when you're talking about the actual mortgage payment. Let's make sure people understand that the payment to income ratio, which the banks somewhat control and says, well, they're going to give a loan if it's based in this category, and remain pretty constant until right now. People buying houses right now, if you had an average income and you bought an average price house in this country, it would be less than 15% of your overall income. And your payments on that house would be almost half of what it was even in 1990. And the payment to rent ratio in 1990 and in 2006, the payment to rent ratio was very high. Now it's almost half that, meaning it's cheaper to buy a house than to rent a house. So let's share this with those 1.9 million people living with their parents. That will help them become first-time home buyers and help their parents move on to whatever their dreams are. It's important that we understand where that opportunity is. That first-time home buyer who right now is caught up living in a rental situation that they don't want to be in. Let's free them of that situation if they're ready for that. Let's not let their misunderstanding of what's taking place in the market or the fear-mongering that's going on in some of the media sources stop them from achieving their dream, the American dream, home ownership. Let's talk about lending standards for a moment here. Here is a report from the OCC. What they did in this survey in 2003 and all the way to 2012 is they asked underwriters, people who are determining who's setting the mortgage, are lending standards getting tighter, are they unchanged, or are they easing up? And we graphed each one of those 3 categories for each year. So what we can see is that between 2003 and 2006, it was either unchanged or eased, and money was free to flow. And then it started to get tighter, and by 2008, no one thought it was getting easier. And in 2009, no one thought it was getting easier as well. And the red bar, those who thought getting a mortgage was getting even more difficult, was rising dramatically. But let's take a look over the last couple of years. The green bar has reappeared and getting bigger, while the red bar is shrinking. It's becoming less tight month over month than it has been in the past. Now, do not assume and do not let buyers in your marketplace assume that they can't get a mortgage. Almost 9,000 people a day do get one. That's important for us to emphasize this over and over. When somebody is doubting that, let's not let their fear make decisions for them. Let's make sure that they understand what their options are. Let's not make them think that they're forced to do something they don't want to do. They can pick whatever option they want, but they should know all their options. And probably most important is they have to realize that owning a home makes sense in the long run financially. Now here is the return on investment, and we update this slide every single month. And we're going to take a few seconds to help you understand where we get these numbers from. First of all, the real estate number comes directly from the Case-Shiller Price Index. They report a number every single month that shows how much did housing prices increase since the year 2000. So it went way up and came falling way down, but it's still 35.8% above where it was in 2000. That's where the numbers come from. The other 3 numbers come from MSN using their financial calculators for the Dow, the S&P, and the NASDAQ. You should save the next couple of slides for when people question you on this. Here are the actual screenshots of what it was Monday, January 3rd, 2003. The Dow Jones, what the number was there, the S&P 500, and the NASDAQ. So you have positive proof that you can carry with you what those numbers were then. You can look up in any newspaper or online at any second and know what those numbers are now, and you can do the math yourself. So don't let people who disagree with your numbers question the numbers. Now again, if you want to dig a little bit deeper and get a better understanding of each slide we've shown you, we provide you with the resources so that you can do a little bit more digging and a little bit more fact finding. Now, we don't have control over how long those links will remain active, but we give you that so that you can go in deeper on any issue that you think that you might want to research further. That's why we provide you with the resources. It gives you all of the links from every slide that we do. Well, we know we went a little longer this month and we apologize for that, but there was a lot of news out there. The more confusion there is in the market, the greater need for an expert. The more confusion there is in the market, the more service we can provide to our neighbors in our neighborhoods. The more confusion there is in the market, the more people we need to provide clarity for. And that's our job. We're not just going to talk about how beautiful the flowers are or that our kid played soccer with their kid. I'm not saying building a rapport isn't important. Of course it is important. But as a program HR 3648 representative, it goes much deeper than that. We give our buyers and our sellers excellent advice. Not always perfect, but excellent advice of what's taking place in the market right now and truly lay out the options for them. Okay, so here we are again, ladies and gentlemen. We've got through the last couple of years. How do we know we got through the last couple of years? You're listening to us right now, and for many, the last couple of years have not been that easy. However, we hope that Program HR 3648 has helped you in some way. We know it helps many of you because we get the emails and the responses from many of you, and we hear your success stories. But we also know how tough it has been in certain markets, and that some of you have been kind of in survival mode over the last couple of years. Some of us have been playing defense, just trying to get through the last couple of years, and the market has changed. But you know what? The market is in the middle of a recovery. It's time for us, especially for those Program HR 3648 representatives who jumped in head first, who started playing offense, not defense, who started attacking, not defending, not worrying about what's going to come next, having the confidence, the faith that we understand what's going to come next. We're prepared for it. We're going to make sure that every one of our buyers and every one of our sellers truly understands their options, truly understands what's taking place in the market. It's our job to be in front of as many of those people as possible. That's right. We are those who weathered the storm and remain standing. But this is no time to sit down and rest. This is no time to pat each other on the back. This game is not over yet. It's time now to get very aggressive, very offensive in our planning and in our thinking. Not aggressive with our buyers and our sellers. I'm talking about aggressive attacking the market, going after the business that's out there, making sure that we're helping every single buyer that needs help, helping every single seller that needs help, truly understand their options and helping them put a plan together again to make those dreams come true. This is our time. We struggled through the tough times, and now we're going to make the most of the opportunities and the good times. But we have to keep playing offense. Well, again, thank you very much. Remember, we are here for you, ready to be an extension of your team to really turn this market around. So until next time, be the solution.